obviously, I want to cut right to the other side of New York City with the Brooklyn Nets. They just cleaned up against the Boston Celtics, winning in Game 5. They are now going to face the Milwaukee Bucks, who swept the Miami Heat. But this is the Nets. This is what they had to say about the upcoming series against the Bucks.
I think a little bit of both. I think that they are getting further along. Every time out, whether it's good or bad performance, whether it's cohesive or not, I think it leads itself to more growth, more understanding, more cohesion. And then some of it is they're just terrific players and are able to take over the game in stretches individually. So a little bit of both, and we're going to need both, frankly, to continue to get better.
For me, I pretty much know, but, I think communication goes a long way. And so I think as long as we're aggressive and we got to communicate throughout the course, and our coaches do a great job of putting us in positions, that's all that matters. I think if us three are on the same page and playing well, and we can communicate with, the rest of the guys on where to be on both ends of the ball, I take our chances against anybody.
Yeah, no, we do understand it's a long journey. So we want to celebrate our small wins. It's easy, to consider the Bucks. Obviously, they're right in front of us in a few days. So I agree. I'm right in the same boat with him. Excited to think about the task at hand. How great that team is. And what it's going to take to be successful against them on both ends of the floor.
I think not even about the playoff run. I think just us. And when I first got traded here, the excitement and the vision of us playing together, I think that's what we were missing the whole season. So I think that's what was more exciting. We weren't even worried about the playoff run yet. We were just happy to be on the court together.
I always like to lean on mental toughness, being able to have the resolve to continue to work, to fight, to persevere, no matter if the game's going well or not, and just sticking with it, never giving up, never giving an inch, and giving yourself a chance on the mental side to compete fully.
He's long, athletic. He plays hard. He cares about his teammates. He cares about winning. You put that combination together, you make a tough player. And his game is expanding. He's hitting the turnaround J now. He's shooting threes. So we got our work cut out for us. He's a two-time MVP, Defensive Player of the Year for a reason. So we're looking forward to the challenge.
So that was the Nets, KD, Kyrie, Harden, Coach Steve Nash, all of them talking about the Bucks in this upcoming series. That Game 1 will take place Saturday in Brooklyn. So, Nick, I'm just going to jump right into and start with you. How are you feeling about this upcoming series? Are you thinking the Nets have the upper hand, or do you see the Bucks sneaking out and advancing past the higher seed?
So this is a very conflicting matter for me here. I've spoke so highly about the Nets so many times, but the Bucks, you could say the exact same thing. They've been spectacular. They showed no mercy, frankly, on the Heat in the opening round. Everyone thought the Heat would have a chance to take them down, and the Bucks just absolutely shut that down. And then likewise over for the Nets. They obviously lost one game when Tatum dropped 50 on them, but they basically showed little to no struggles taking care of Boston. And now, in my opinion, the two best teams in the East meet up in the second round. So I really think if I'm going to pick right now, I'm going to say the Nets are going to win it. And I've been sticking by that this whole time. When you listen to those clips that we just played, all those guys just they're so experienced with this playoff atmosphere. They're so locked in. Obviously, KD and Kyrie have those championship rings, or ring in Kyrie's case, to show for it. And Harden's trying to get that. But these guys are just experienced playoff players, I guess is the easy way to say it. And they just sound so locked in. They're not messing around. KD knows exactly what he's ready to face against Giannis. He said two-time MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. They're ready. But, again, I do want to show some love to the Bucks because those guys have shown they're ready. Drew Holiday could arguably be, in some cases, I think he's the best player on that team when Giannis does not show up. But he's the X factor. He's a great defender. He does everything well. So, and I've always loved him in his career through the NBA. But I really think this could be the best series in the playoffs total. But I'm going to give it to the Nets. And if I had to pick in how many games, I'll go with 6. I don't think it's going to get to 7, especially because Brooklyn's got home court.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Bucks. I think this is a better Bucks team. And you know what? On paper, this is a Nets team that is a juggernaut. You got Harden, you got KD, you got Kyrie, and rotating against this team is miserable for the defense, because even when you rotate correctly, Joe Harris is going to knock down a three. I mean, this is a guy who's led the league in 3-point percentage 2 out of the last 3 years. So he is no joke fourth offensive weapon for the Nets. So this is obviously going to be a problem for any team to defend. But I just think that the Bucks present the Nets so many problems. I mean, the Nets are not a great defensive team, and the Bucks have a lot of weapons of their own. And the one team that outscored the Nets this year was the Bucks. So I think the Bucks are just as deadly offensively as the Nets are. I mean, maybe you're going to take the Nets off out perimeter shooting. You're going to take the Nets one-on-one ability, but when you match up the Bucks against the Nets, I mean, I think the Bucks are going to be able to go pound for pound with round for round with the Nets offensively. I mean, Giannis has killed the Brooklyn in the regular season. He had 36, he had 49, and he had 34. He averaged 38 a game in the regular season against the Nets. They had no answer. And then you talk about who's going to guard him. Is Blake Griffin going to guard Giannis? I mean, that's going to be a bloodbath early. I mean, you talk about what might happen if, like, Kevin Durant is not going to be able to stop Giannis. They don't really have someone that can guard him. Not many teams do, but I don't see the Nets small ball offense being able to contain a guy like Giannis. And even like someone like Drew Holiday, I think he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league right now, and he can contain a guy like Harden. Maybe not 35-40, he drops 25-30 instead. Maybe a guy like Kyrie, Drew Holiday matches up against. And he's also going to be really good on his pick and roll, so he can switch well. He's a bigger guard. He's 6'3". Eric Bledsoe, that was his predecessor, was 6'1", and that presented a lot of problems defensively for the Bucks. So for those reasons, it's hard for me not to take the Bucks. It's also a team that's been battle tested. They've been here before and they've lost. So I like to think they make adjustments and they take down this Nets team that is relatively new to playing each other. I'm going to take this take this Bucks team to beat Brooklyn Saturday and for the rest of the series.
So my, I guess, criticism towards you there would be there are two guards, I guess, for Brooklyn, of course, who are going to be killers in the series, being Kyrie and James Harden. So you obviously have Drew to stop one of them. Where's the other? And this is why I say this. Dante DiVincenzo, obviously out for the rest of the playoffs. Huge, huge factor for those guys. My question then to you would be, who steps up there? Who's going to take on his both offensive and defensive responsibilities? He's also a spectacular rebounder, which the Bucks may not need that much against the Nets, considering they're not a big team. But my question to you would then be, who's going to step up and now guard that other superstar in the backcourt in Brooklyn?
No, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a question. I think Pat Connaughton's going to be some guy. I mean, he's not a great matchup for either of them, but like I said, the Nets are a juggernaut. You're not going to be able to guard either of those guys relatively well. I think what I'm saying basically is Drew Holiday is a better matchup for either of those two than the Sixers have, or let's say any team out of the West has. I think maybe Conley and Mitchell match up better, but I still think that the Bucks are going to be able to at least contain one of those guys. And I'd also take my chances with that matchup of the two guards against the Bucks, then Giannis against those bigs that the Nets have. I mean, the interior defense to the Nets is absolutely miserable. I mean, Blake Griffin's your 5 and DeAndre Jordan's your backup center. I mean, none of those guys are either A, quick enough to guard Giannis, or B, physical enough to guard him. So I think that's just going to be a nightmare for the Nets. I mean, I'd go as much as say that Giannis might average 35 in this series. And obviously the Nets have the firepower to back that up, but there's only so many shots to go around. I mean, at a certain point, just because you have a lot of stars doesn't mean you get a lot of shots with it. So I think that the Bucks might get easier buckets against this Net team. And let's say the Nets are off one night. Obviously, if Harden has a bad game, KD could drop 40. But, I mean, a lot of there is on perimeter shooting. I think the Bucks get easy shots in this series. And I just think that their physicality and their size, especially with Giannis and Drew Holiday is a big guard, present problem for the Nets. And Chris Middleton has grown a lot as a player. I mean, his points per game are down since last year, but that's much because he's needed to do less. And in my opinion, when you don't ask Chris Middleton of as much, that's just as much better for the team. I mean, in the past 2 years, Chris Middleton has been asked to be literally an all-star caliber player, which should not be his role on a winning team. And I think when you add Drew Holiday there to take some of the offensive burden away from Chris Middleton, they both are able to support each other better. So I think this is like maybe not one of the like a legit big three like the Nets have or the Heat had or even the Cavaliers had, but I mean, this is Giannis with two great supporting players, and I think that should be enough to at least send this game to 7 against the Nets. And listen, the Nets might be the favorites, but I'm going to take the upset pick, and I think the Bucks are going to – I think Giannis is going to have an all-time series, and I think they're going to pull away from the Nets.
I guess the X factor here in this whole series for me, one guy on the Bucks you did not mention who is the starting 5 for them is Brook Lopez. Where does he fit in this series? He obviously is still very impactful. He had a great series against Miami, but the Nets play more of a small ball style. Obviously, Blake Griffin's their 5. KD often will be the biggest guy out on the court. So it's a small ball, more versatile unit for the Nets, and obviously rebounding and defense has always been an issue. But I almost I think we will see the Bucks are going to have to make some sort of adjustment to their usual play in terms of, or maybe they don't make the adjustment, and maybe it's just a shootout between both teams. Because who is Brook Lopez going to guard on the court, just like who's going to guard Giannis? It goes both ways.
I think the biggest thing could be like PJ Tucker, a guy like that. I mean,
yeah,
he's very versatile. I mean, he dominated defensively against Jimmy Butler. I mean, he was great against him. I mean, when PJ Tucker was guarding Jimmy Butler, Butler was 2 for 12 from the field in those 4 games. So, I mean, he's a guy that could flex and guard someone like Harden. I mean, he knows Harden better than anyone. I mean, as much as Harden, I think that's going to help PJ Tucker that much, but he knows him and he's a veteran in this league. If anyone can stretch and guard a guy like Harden or then drop down to a 5, which he did with Houston, I mean, he's someone that's going to be huge for the Bucks. And I think that versatility is going to pay dividends in this series. So I think that, let's say maybe they stick with Lopez and they run just a huge lineup, but let's say they bring Lopez off the bench, they can run Tucker in his place. And I think that would be huge for them. And I just think that this Bucks team is a lot better than they were. I mean, they had a lot of old pieces. They had Kyle Korver, Marvin Williams, Wesley Matthews, George Hill, all gone. And they have younger players. They have Bobby Portis, Bryn Forbes. These are guys that are much better pieces than what they had in the years past. If there's one thing I would want people to know is that this is not the Bucks team we saw in the bubble. This is not the Bucks team we saw the year before that. I mean, this is a team that's going to contend with this Nets team. And if the Nets are at full power and they're all knocking down shots, it's hard for anybody to stop them. But I'm taking the underdog pick, and I think that the Bucks have a serious chance to beating the Nets, and I'm going to take them to beat the Nets.
I honestly think the final thing I'll say with this series is I think call it a hot take if you want, but I don't really think it's that hot of a take. I think this is the 2 best teams in the league right now matching up against each other early in this series, or in the playoffs, excuse me. Obviously the West has some talent out there too, but you think Lakers, and of course we'll get to them. Who knows with AD? But I think this series is the most talented. It should be the best I'm hoping. I still think the Nets will take it because they're the Nets. The power on that team, like I've said before, just I don't think it's ever been seen or even close to rivaled. Maybe with the KD Warriors. But I just think this team is spectacular. Bucks, of course, too, are awesome as well. I love that team. But, again, finally something we disagree on here. I'll take the Bucks. I'll take the Nets.
I will agree that this might be my finals. I mean, I think the winner of this has a serious shot to win the title. I think the top of the East might be stronger than the top of the West this year, which is very weird to say because the West is dominant for years and years on end. But the East looks a little stronger.